Welcome to our video about the fascinating world of Pokemon and their placement on the Tree of Life. Today, we take a closer look at Farfetch'd and its relationship with Gold Duck, as they are both part of the Anatidae clade. Ready? Let's go! The mallard, Anas platyrhynchos, is a bird species from the duck family, Anatidae. The mallard is the largest and most common dabbling duck in Europe and is the ancestral form of the domestic duck. Adult males and breeding plumage are unmistakable with their green metallic head, yellow beak, and white neck ring, while females are more inconspicuous, appearing light brown with an orange beak. Mallards are found throughout most of Eurasia, in the far north of Africa, and across large parts of North America. They have also been introduced as breeding birds in New Zealand and Australia. Their abundance is due to their adaptability in choosing both breeding sites and habitats, as long as some form of water is available. The obsolete name March duck refers to the mallard's mating season. The modern name can be seen as an indication of its breeding sites, which include pollard willows, willow thickets, or piles of brushwood. Although mallards do not frequently nest in such locations, the behavior is distinct enough among ducks to have led to the common name in use today. For a long time, the name wild duck was more commonly used. However, from an ornithological perspective, this designation is unsatisfactory, as it is applied broadly to all wild ducks. The term remains in use among hunters and is also found in gastronomy, where a dish labeled wild duck usually refers to a mallard. The scientific species name platyrhynchos means broad beak and originates from ancient Greek, pi lambda alpha tau, plaides, equals broad. Flat, gamma chi omicron, rhynchos, equals beak, snout. Mallards grow up to 58 centimeters in length, with a wingspan of up to 95 centimeters. The male wears its eclipse plumage between July and August and closely resembles the female during this period. The only way to distinguish the sexes during this time is by beak coloration. While the male's beak remains distinctly yellow, sometimes with a greenish hue, the female's beak is orange in base color, with varying degrees of dark gray to brown shading, either fully or partially concentrated in the middle. The female has a brown-gray mottled coloration, providing excellent camouflage on land. The only conspicuous feature is the blue speculum, which is identical in both sexes. In flight, the white border of the blue speculum is visible in both sexes. Mallards have about 10,000 down feathers and contour feathers that protect them from moisture and cold. They constantly oil their plumage, preventing water from penetrating the feathers. The uropygial gland at the base of the tail provides the oil. The duck takes the oil with its beak and spreads it over its feathers. On water, the duck is carried by an air cushion. The air is trapped between the down feathers, while the contour feathers seal the down. Together with the fat layer beneath the skin, the enclosed air prevents heat loss and keeps the duck from cooling down. The drake's breeding plumage is gray with a brown breast, a brownish back, and black upper and lower tail coverts. The head is metallic green with a white neck ring below, and the beak is greenish-yellow. At the trailing edge of the wings, there is a metallic blue band bordered with white, the speculum. The black feathers at the tip of the tail are curled into drake feathers. There are significant individual and population-specific differences in the molting process. In Central European mallards, males begin their prenuptial molt between July and August, first replacing the wing feathers, making them flightless for 3 to 5 weeks. During this period, the rest of their plumage changes, and only in December is the development of their breeding plumage complete. The postnuptial molt in drakes begins as early as mid-May, when they shed the central tail feathers while females are still incubating. This is followed by the molt of the smaller feathers. For females, the wing molt occurs in September, and the molt of small feathers in breeding plumage happens between October and November. Mallards tend to hybridize with other duck species, particularly with domestic ducks descended from them. Conversely, wild mallards are often introduced to domestic duck populations to refresh the gene pool or breed new varieties. Individuals whose appearance deviates from the typical mallard are occasionally observed in rural areas. However, miscolored individuals are more frequently found in urban populations, likely due to escaped domestic ducks and exotic ornamental waterfowl settling in the same areas as wild mallards. These individuals have a reduced flight distance from humans and access to abundant food. Common miscolorations include dark, almost black, brown, or dark green individuals. A white patch on the chest is often seen, likely due to hybridization with white domestic ducks. Less common are individuals with lightened areas. Some males have darkened wing coverts or an enlarged white neck ring. In Hamburg, 13% of inner-city mallards are miscolored, compared to only 0.7% in suburban areas. To reduce further hybridization, miscolored individuals are preferentially culled. Mallard ducklings have brown upper bodies and yellowish-brown undersides. A dark stripe runs from the base of the beak over the eye to the nape. A small dark spot is located behind the head at ear height, and some ducklings have another dark spot at the base of the beak. The sides of the head and the front of the neck are yellowish-brown. Yellow patches are also found on the wings, back, and flanks. At hatching, mallard ducklings have a dark gray upper beak with a light brown nail. The beak edges may have a pinkish-brown hue. The lower beak is brownish-pink. Their legs and feet are dark gray, with a slight yellowish tint on the sides of the legs. Their webbed feet are dark. By the time young mallards fledge, their upper beak is pale blue-gray, while their legs and feet are yellow-orange with dark webbing. Their juvenile plumage largely resembles the female's eclipse plumage. In young ducks, however, the contour feathers on the belly side are darker than those of the female's resting plumage. The sexes can be distinguished by the white coloring at the tips of the large wing coverts. In females, this white extends up to the 15th feather, whereas in males, it reaches only the 12th feather. The mallard is found across the entire northern hemisphere, from Europe through Asia to North America. In North America, it is absent only in the extreme north, in the tundra regions from Canada to Maine and eastward to Nova Scotia. Its primary North American range is in the so-called prairie pothole region, spanning North and South Dakota, Manitoba, and Saskatchewan. In Europe, it is absent only from higher mountain areas. In the Alps, it is still common in open valleys at elevations up to 1,000 meters, with the highest recorded breeding sites at around 2,000 meters. In Asia, the mallard avoids the coldest tundra and extends as far east as the Himalayas. As a breeding bird, it is limited to the Holarctic region, reaching the Oriental region only for wintering. For example, it winters in the plains of northern India and southern China. The mallard has been introduced to Australia and New Zealand and is found wherever the climate matches that of its northern hemisphere range. In Australia, it was introduced as early as 1862 and has spread across the continent, particularly since the 1950s. Due to its climatic requirements, it is relatively rare in Australia, mainly inhabiting Tasmania, the southeastern region, and a small area in the southwest. In Australia, mallards tend to occupy urban environments or highly modified agricultural landscapes and are rarely found in sparsely populated areas. In New Zealand, mallards were introduced in large numbers from 1867 onward. Between 1896 and 1918, they were regularly released on the North Island. Introduction attempts on the South Island in the 1920s were mostly unsuccessful, but by the 1950s, mallards had begun to spread extensively, eventually establishing populations on the South Island. By 1981, the New Zealand mallard population was estimated at over 5 million individuals. Today, mallards are also found on Stewart Island and other smaller islands off the New Zealand coast. The introduction of mallards to New Zealand is now considered problematic, as they hybridize with the native brown teal. The first hybrids were reported in 1917, and it is now believed that all brown teal populations contain mallard genes. By the third generation, hybrids are no longer visibly distinguishable from pure mallards. Mallards are highly adaptable and can be found nearly anywhere with bodies of water. They swim in lakes, ponds, inland waterways, mountain lakes, and even small forest and meadow streams. Similar to the blackbird, mallards have undergone a process of urbanization, which, according to a report by Johann Friedrich Naumann, began as early as the 18th century. City-dwelling mallards inhabit urban water bodies, especially ponds and lakes and parks, as well as rivers flowing through cities and other natural water sources, such as urban lakes. Even large fountains are occupied by mallards. Because they are not selective about nesting sites and have an omnivorous diet, mallards are particularly suited to urbanization. In cities, mallards choose nesting sites that may seem unusual from a human perspective, such as balconies, flat rooftops of tall buildings, as well as sheds or stables. In some regions, mallards compete with Egyptian geese, which have been introduced in recent years. In general, mallards are at a disadvantage when defending breeding sites against Egyptian geese. The mallard is not selective about its preferred food. It is a highly omnivorous species that eats anything it can sufficiently digest and acquire without much effort. New food sources are quickly recognized and immediately utilized. Mallards primarily consume plant-based food, including seeds, fruits, aquatic, shoreline, and land plants. However, their diet also includes mollusks, larvae, small crustaceans, tadpoles, spawn, small fish, frogs, worms, and snails. The composition of their diet varies with the seasons. In Central Europe, mallards feed almost exclusively on plant matter at the beginning and during the breeding season, initially preferring seeds and overwintered green parts, followed by newly sprouting greenery. By the time the ducklings hatch, they find an abundance of plant-based food as well as plentiful animal-based food in the form of insects and their larvae. Although mallard ducklings are not specialized in a particular diet and can find sufficient food as early as May in Central Europe, experiments have demonstrated the influence of animal protein on their development. Young mallards that consume a diet rich in animal protein exhibit significantly higher growth rates than those that rely mainly on plant-based food. Once the young are fully fledged, mallards increasingly search for food in fields, where they particularly favor unripe grains. In autumn, they also consume acorns and other nuts. Potatoes have become a food source as well. Their adaptation to this South American crop is well documented in Britain. Mallards first adopted this dietary habit during the harsh winters between 1837 and 1855, encouraged by the potato blight, which led many farmers to leave their rotting crops in the fields. According to English reports from 1863, mallards even preferred blighted potatoes over grain. At feeding sites, mallards occasionally eat bread and kitchen scraps. Despite their dietary flexibility, they do not consume salt-loving plants. For example, mallards in Greenland feed almost exclusively on marine mollusks. While foraging underwater, mallards dip their heads, strike the surface with their wings, and then tilt forward. This characteristic posture, with the tail vertically protruding from the water, is known as dabbling. They search the underwater sediment for food at depths of up to half a meter. Using their beaks, they bite off plant material and expel the water they ingest through the serrated edges of their beaks. These structures act as a sieve, trapping food. A distinctive feature of mallards is their elaborate communal courtship among multiple drakes, occurring shortly after they have acquired their breeding plumage in early autumn. During this display, drakes puff up their belly and flank feathers and slightly raise their wings. They exhibit a typical movement pattern, in which they first vigorously shake their tail feathers with their head plumage fluffed, then retract their heads deeply before suddenly snapping them upward. Afterward, they settle back down while shaking their tail feathers again. This is followed by conspicuous, repeatedly executed movements, which Konrad Lorenz described as grunting whistle, brief heightening, and up-down motion. The communal courtship of mallards does not serve as a prelude to mating but instead contributes to group formation among drakes, which later facilitates pair bonding with females. After this communal courtship, multiple drakes loosely form pairs for the first time. Following this engagement period, which includes behaviors such as drinking together and chasing away other drakes, as well as swimming closely behind or alongside one another, the annual mate selection process, known as the rheosite, occurs between January and early February. This courtship phase is called rheosite because multiple drakes line up behind the few available females. Mallards also frequently engage in ray flights, in which several males follow a single female in flight. Although mallards possess an extensive repertoire of courtship behaviors, these displays are often not performed during male competition for mates. Instead, females are frequently mated by multiple drakes without the usual courtship rituals. Numerous cases have been documented in which an overzealous group of males unintentionally drowns a female. Together, mallard pairs search for a nesting site, which may be located on a riverbank or sometimes as far as 2 to 3 kilometers from water. Mallards are highly versatile in their choice of nesting locations. Studies attempting to identify specific nest site characteristics have shown only that site selection adapts to the surrounding environment. In lowland areas, nests are mostly found in grasslands. At lakes with dense vegetation belts, they are located within shoreline vegetation, and at forest lakes, they are typically in wooded areas. In Poland's Warta floodplain, mallards commonly nest in trees. In forests, they breed on tree stumps, accept tree cavities, and even use abandoned crow, magpie, and raptor nests. The nest itself is a simple, shallow depression that the female presses into the ground and lines with coarse stalks. After building the nest and beginning incubation, the drake leaves the female, a behavior that may be an adaptation to his conspicuous plumage. Females lay one clutch per year, consisting of 7 to 16 eggs. Incubated for 25 to 28 days. Starting in March, they lay one egg per day. If the first 4 exposed eggs remain untouched by nest predators, the female continues laying in the same nest, covering the eggs upon temporarily leaving. 3 days before hatching, the duckling begins to chirp. Using its egg tooth, a sharp tip at the end of its beak, it pierces a hole in the eggshell and struggles to break free before lying exhausted. Mallards are precocial birds, meaning they are highly developed at hatching. They leave the nest within 6 to 12 hours and can swim immediately. Their instinct to dive into any available hole when fleeing can lead to difficulties in urban environments, where they sometimes end up trapped in storm drains, basement shafts, or similar structures from which they cannot escape on their own. During the first few hours of life, ducklings follow the first living thing they see, which is typically their mother. This interaction of learned and instinctive behavior is known as imprinting and is a crucial part of the reproductive cycle in precocial birds. After 8 weeks, young mallards are capable of flight. For about 50 to 60 days, the female remains with her fledged ducklings in a family group known as a shoof. Mallards display considerable variability in their migratory behavior. Those from Eastern and Northern Europe are mostly migratory birds, traveling to Central, Western, or Southwestern Europe from October onward. However, mallards native to Western and Southern Europe typically do not migrate and remain as resident birds year-round. Mallards native to Central Europe may remain in their location, undertake shorter migrations, or even travel farther southwest. On July 9, 1963, a commercial airplane over Nevada collided with a mallard at an altitude of 6,400 meters, 21,000 feet. A mallard from Hesse flew 2,250 kilometers in less than 3 days, reaching a lake 300 kilometers north of Moscow at speeds of up to 125 kilometers per hour. The blue duck, Hymenolaemus malacarincos, also known as the wyo due to the male's distinctive call, is a species within the order of waterfowl. Primarily insectivorous, it is the only species in the genus Hymenolaemus and, along with the Licon duck, Bernese teal, and Madagascar teal, is one of the rarest duck species in the world. Its distribution is limited to fast-flowing, clear, rocky streams and rivers in New Zealand. In recent years, its population has significantly declined due to habitat loss, increased predation by introduced species such as weasels, stoats, and feral cats, and possible food competition from introduced rainbow trout. The IUCN classifies the blue duck as endangered, estimating the population at around 1,200 sexually mature individuals. Like other endangered New Zealand birds, such as the kakapo, South Island takahe, and kiwis, conservation efforts are underway to increase population numbers. Blue ducks are somewhat smaller and lighter than European mallards. The average body weight of an adult drake is 890 grams, while a mature female weighs around 750 grams. Their wing length ranges from 23.5 to 25 centimeters. The plumage of males and females is nearly identical, with females being slightly smaller. The feathers on the upper body, known as the mantle, are blue-gray with brownish-gray speckles. The breast is mottled reddish-brown and blue-gray, though some individuals have predominantly reddish-brown tones. The blue-gray shoulder feathers, or scapulars, are thinly bordered in black. The tail coverts, flanks, and wings are uniformly blue-gray, while the head and neck feathers are dark blue-gray. The area between the eyes and the base of the bill has a greenish sheen. Feet and legs are flesh-colored, the iris ranges from yellow to orange, and the bill is pale flesh-colored to yellowish, with a black tip. Several characteristics adapt blue ducks to their life in fast-moving waters. Their eyes are positioned in the skull to provide an unusually forward-facing field of vision for a duck, which some ornithologists believe aids in hunting aquatic insects. The bill features a dark, soft membrane at the tip, protecting it from injury while foraging on stone surfaces. Blue ducks float relatively high in the water, allowing them to remain stable even in turbulent currents. Ducklings are black-gray on the crown, back, wings, thighs, and sides of the belly. Their face is grayish-white, with a dark stripe running across their dark eyes. The grayish-white eyebrows are separated by a thin black stripe on the forehead. Their breast, underside, front neck, and the trailing edge of their wings are also grayish-white. At hatching, their bill is dark gray-blue. Around 8 weeks of age, they molt into their first juvenile plumage. Immature blue ducks differ from adults by having overall duller plumage. They lack the reddish-brown breast mottling or have a less pronounced pattern. The black edging on the scapulars is absent. Their bill is still pale blue-gray, and their iris is dark brown. Young blue ducks begin to show the characteristic flesh-colored bill and the bright yellow to orange iris typical of adults from their 9th month onward. Blue ducks are among the duck species that are highly reluctant to take flight. They primarily move by swimming and walking. However, even very young ducklings exhibit strong jumping abilities, allowing them to leap onto protruding rocks from the water. Despite their reluctance to fly, blue ducks are powerful flyers, with recorded wing beat frequencies of up to 480 beats per minute. Individual observations of this still insufficiently studied duck species suggest that they patrol their territory in flight at dusk. During flight, blue ducks extend their necks and heads horizontally forward. They typically fly just above the surface of the water. Blue ducks are endemic to New Zealand and are found on both the South and North Islands. Originally, breeding populations of blue ducks existed wherever the banks of clear, rocky, fast-flowing, and shallow waters were densely forested. Typical blue duck habitats featured partially shaded streams and relatively stable water levels, as highly variable flows and particularly floods wash away algae and moss that provide shelter for the aquatic insects on which they feed. As long as rivers retained their fast-flowing nature and their banks remained forested, blue ducks inhabited them all the way to their estuaries on the coast. Most rivers only provided suitable habitats along their upper and middle courses, where blue ducks could be found up to the alpine tree line. The forests surrounding these areas, or still present in untouched regions, were the endemic broadleaf tree fern forests of New Zealand. Population densities along such rivers and streams could be very high. As recently as the 1960s, a conservation officer traveling along 2 rivers in pristine forests found a breeding territory with a pair of blue ducks every few hundred meters. Several factors have led to a significant decline in the number of territories that provide suitable habitats for blue ducks. The settlement of New Zealand by the Maori around 800 years ago resulted in a 25% reduction in the country's forests. The Maori also brought dogs and the Polynesian rat to New Zealand, both of which are potential predators of blue ducks. However, archaeological studies of Maori midden sites suggest that blue ducks were only occasionally hunted. Since European colonization of New Zealand about 200 years ago, forest cover has been further reduced by another 25%. Logging has also altered the structure of remaining forests, and the construction of hydroelectric dams has destroyed many habitats. Equally significant as the reduction in forest cover is the impact of introduced species associated with European settlement. Among these non-native species are the red fox, stoats, weasels, domestic cats, red deer, possums, brush-tailed possums, domestic sheep, pigs, goats, Canada geese, and rainbow trout. The introduction of these animals and changes in forest ecosystems have had a severely detrimental effect on many of New Zealand's endemic species. One of the most well-known examples is the owl parrot, or kakapo, whose survival is being secured by relocating the remaining individuals to islands free from introduced predators. Until the 1990s, the blue duck was considered one of New Zealand's endemic species whose potential habitat had diminished and whose population had declined significantly. However, It was not regarded as an immediate risk of extinction. Its continued existence seemed assured because there still appeared to be a sufficient number of suitable habitats. The duck specialist ornithologist Hartmut Kolbe reported population numbers between 2,000 and 4,000 individuals as of 1995, with its distribution spanning the interior of New Zealand's North Island and the entire western half of the South Island. However, even Kolbe noted that increasingly suitable territories were left unoccupied when older birds died. Since the beginning of the 21st century, assessments of the conservation status of the blue duck have shifted. In 2003, the World Conservation Union classified the species as highly endangered. This classification is primarily based on the realization that blue ducks now exist in isolated populations with no exchange between them. Each of these fragmented populations faces the risk of extinction due to natural disasters such as forest fires or further habitat destruction. Additionally, the increased pressure from introduced predators and competitors has led to behavioral changes that hinder population recovery. This holds true even in New Zealand regions that appear to have remained largely in their natural state and are today considered the most densely populated blue duck habitats. These areas include Te Urua, home to the largest untouched forests on the North Island, New Zealand's largest national park. The Tongariro National Park, the west coast of the South Island, the Fiordland region, as well as the surroundings of Mount Taranaki and Kahurangi National Park, blue ducks are among the relatively little-studied duck species. The first intensive field studies were conducted in the late 1960s by British ornithologist Janet Keir, a member of the Wildfowl Trust. Many of the current established findings stem from these investigations. Blue ducks feed on the larvae of caddisflies, stoneflies, and mayflies. They gather some of these insects from underwater rocks in riverbeds and streambeds. Additionally, they are capable of catching fully grown, flying insects mid-air during the New Zealand winter months. They also consume a variety of berries. Aquatic insects, which make up the bulk of the blue duck's diet, are also preferred food sources for the rainbow trout, an introduced species in New Zealand. However, the impact of rainbow trout on blue duck populations has not yet been sufficiently studied. That's it for now. In the next episode, we'll take a closer look at Dodrio and its relationship with all other birds. Feel free to subscribe to our channel, leave a like, and check in next